In this video, I ask, did the Generals Handbook save Games Workshop? Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Before I get into the subject, if you haven't already subscribed, please click that subscribe button and don't forget the little bell notification as well to make sure you don't miss any videos from me. Tomorrow, the Generals Handbook 2017 is released, and this is the second iteration of Generals Handbooks for Age of Sigmar. Now let's not forget, when Age of Sigmar was first released, there were no point costs, there was no Generals Handbook, and Age of Sigmar and Games Workshop were in a very, very different position. And this got me thinking recently, did Games Workshop really save their company by releasing the Generals Handbook? So let me give that some context. Going back just over 12 months ago, before the Generals Handbook came out, Age of Sigmar was in a very, very shaky position. The rules had been very much simplified from old Warhammer Fantasy style games, certainly much more simplified than the current edition of Warhammer 40,000 at the time, which was 7th edition. And people were basically saying that Games Workshop were basically in a bit of a free fall. They were in a bit of a demise. Fantasy hadn't been selling very well. They tried to rejuvenate their brand with Age of Sigmar, and the lack of point cost really pushed away that hardcore gamer who buys multiple models, who buys regularly, sort of every week, every month, and really does kind of feed that Games Workshop miniature machine. Games Workshop had always said they were more about the miniatures than the games themselves. However, this kind of reluctance to really concentrate on the rules seemed to be catching up with them. So I think it was June of last year, of 2016, the Generals Handbook was released. And in the Generals Handbook were 3 ways to play. This was matched player, which had the point costs, which everybody was really concerned about. There was open player and there was narrative player. And this kind of changed a very different direction and went against really what Games Workshop had intended, and that Age of Sigmar would be a very friendly, agree with your opponent how many points you play kind of a game. This, for my knowledge, was the first time Games Workshop had really listened to community feedback and changed their game to suit. We saw the Generals Handbook come out, we saw the point costs come out, and from that point onwards, I think we can all agree Age of Sigmar had been on an upward spiral. We see lots of new rules coming in. We also see armies like the Caradron Overlords, and I'm not sure we would have seen them if we hadn't seen the success of the Generals Handbook. Then we fast forward a little bit further, and we have Warhammer 40,000 8th edition. And what have Games Workshop learned from old editions of Warhammer? What they've done is they've streamlined the rules, not simplified them. I think that would suggest that they have oversimplified the game, but they've streamlined the rules very much in line with Age of Sigmar, and they've launched the game basically with points. I don't think they would have dreamed of launching Warhammer 40,000 8th edition without points after the backlash that Age of Sigmar got on its launch. So Games Workshop, as I've mentioned in a few of my videos, and you can see the one about global domination here, in my opinion, Games Workshop have really gone from strength to strength since that launch of the Generals Handbook. Not only did they listen to the community and implement something that had been asked for, but they actually got the community involved in creating the Generals Handbook. They took some of the point costs that had been created by sort of compacts from Age of Sigmar tournaments and used them as a starting point. Warhammer TV came along probably not too long afterwards. The community site came along, their Facebook pages came along, and this was really, as far as I can remember, and maybe you guys can tell me something different, but this was the point when Games Workshop, the huge behemoth that it is, started to make an about turn and really started to pick up some of its players that it had cast aside over the years. So here we are now, Generals Handbook 2017. There's been a few tweaks to point levels. They've really tried to recost a few things and tried to change the meta of the game. So at the minute, shooting armies are very popular, certainly in the UK from what I can tell. I don't know how it is around the world. And Generals Handbook 2017 will hopefully try to address some of these things. And certainly the introduction of the new alliance rules, where you can kind of ally with a sort of different factions, will certainly bring a fresh perspective to army list building, and will no doubt create some utter filth lists that nobody's thought of just yet. It keeps it interesting, it's pushing it forward, and rather than just waiting maybe 2 or 3 years and releasing a new edition of Warhammer Fantasy, as used to happen in the past, here we have 12 months approximately later, a refresh of point costs, an alignment of some of the rules that maybe were a little bit clunky or maybe they weren't quite understood very well and the FAQs didn't address. But what we have is a refresh of the game, much in the way games like War Machine did for years, where they have a new set of missions for tournament play, sort of a new tournament pack if you like, and that tends to be the kind of the 6 missions that get played amongst tournaments. Again, Generals Handbook 2017 is going to do that for Age of Sigmar, and it wouldn't surprise me, certainly with the speed of releases of the new codexes, on the back of the index books for Warhammer 40,000 and the speed of FAQs, the way Games Workshop really clamped down on the flyer spam, what they started to see in tournaments very early in 8th edition. It wouldn't surprise me if this is the way that 8th edition is going to go as well for 40k. So with Necromunda to come later this year and Shadespire coming a little bit earlier probably than we expected this year, that certainly shows an intent that Games Workshop is really in this to address some of their issues that they've had in the past and really try to win back their fan base of days lost. So over to you folks, what do you think? Do you think this was the point in time when Games Workshop made that big turn? I know they had their new sort of CEO takeover, and I've no doubt he made a big impact on this, but that seems to be almost, if I could pinpoint a point in the last 5 years when I think things started to change, it was the Generals Handbook release. And with the new one coming out now, then I think we've only got good things to look forward to in the future. Let me know down in the comments below. Join the BlackJack Legacy Facebook group and maybe let me know there as well. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.